He ruled Panama with fear. He defied the United States. And when the world least expected it, the U.S. military unleashed one of the fastest and most precise invasions in history. This is the true story of Operation Just Cause, when American soldiers crossed the line between diplomacy and destiny to take down a dictator in 48 hours. In the 1980s, Panama wasn't just a small Central American country, it was a lifeline. The Panama Canal, stretching 50 miles from the Atlantic to the Pacific, connected world trade and U.S. naval power. Whoever controlled Panama controlled one of the most strategic waterways on Earth. But one man, General Manuel Noriega, turned that lifeline into a nightmare. Noriega was once a U.S. ally, trained by American intelligence, supported by Washington, and paid to help fight communism in Latin America. But power changes men. By the mid-1980s, Noriega had transformed into a ruthless dictator, ruling through fear, torture, and corruption. He controlled the military, the media, and the streets. Behind the scenes, he was running a massive drug operation, partnering with the Medellin cartel to flood the U.S. with cocaine. The CIA once called him "our man in Panama." But by 1988, he had become America's enemy number one in Central America. In 1989, relations between the U.S. and Panama were at their lowest point in decades. The U.S. wanted Noriega gone. He was indicted on drug trafficking and money laundering charges in Miami. President George H.W. Bush ordered sanctions, froze Panama's assets, and began quietly preparing the military. Tensions exploded when Panamanian troops attacked American servicemen near the Canal Zone. On December 16, 1989, U.S. Marine Lieutenant Robert Paz was killed at a roadblock by Noriega's soldiers. That was it. The line had been crossed. Bush gave the green light. The safety of American citizens is at risk. It is time for decisive action. The mission was clear. Remove Noriega. Protect American lives. Restore democracy. At 1 a.m., December 20th, 1989, the skies over Panama lit up. In one of the most coordinated surprise invasions in U.S. history, 27,000 American troops launched Operation Just Cause. Army Rangers, Marines, Navy SEALs, and Special Forces struck 27 targets simultaneously. The goal? Capture Noriega, destroy the Panamanian Defense Forces, and secure the canal. Within minutes, the night sky echoed with the roar of C-130 Hercules, Black Hawk helicopters, and the thunder of paratroopers jumping into darkness. Every soldier knew this mission had to be fast, precise, and decisive. For veterans who were there, it felt like lightning. One ranger recalled, "It wasn't just another deployment. It was a message to the world. America will protect its own." Months of planning had gone into this moment. Intelligence teams mapped every base, every stronghold, every street corner in Panama City. The military rehearsed the invasion under code names and secrecy. Units like the 82nd Airborne Division, the 7th Infantry Division Light, and 1st Battalion 75th Ranger Regiment were handpicked. Every detail mattered, from air routes to target timing to minimizing civilian casualties. But the soldiers knew, no matter how perfect the plan, war never goes perfectly. One Marine wrote in his diary before the jump, "They told us it'll be quick. But when the first shot is fired, time slows down. It's not about speed anymore. It's about heart." In the hours before the invasion, tension gripped every American base in the region. Soldiers prayed, checked their weapons, and stared into the night sky, knowing history was about to change. On the other side, Noriega sat in his command bunker, confident his army would resist. He had nearly 12,000 troops, armored vehicles, and loyal commanders. But what he didn't know was that the storm was already moving toward him. As the clock ticked toward midnight, American paratroopers lined up inside their planes. Engines roared. The red light turned green. And in that moment, the United States went to war with a dictator. The clock struck midnight on December 20th, 1989. Panama's capital was quiet. For the last time. In the blackness above, hundreds of American paratroopers waited for a green light. Engines thundered, hearts pounded. And then, The sky opened up. Go, go, go! Thousands of parachutes bloomed over Panama City. Operation Just Cause had begun. Within seconds, the silence shattered. Army Rangers from the 75th Regiment stormed Torrijos Tocumen Airport, a critical hub connecting the capital. They hit the ground under enemy fire, tracer rounds slicing through the dark. Ranger radios buzzed with chaos. Taking fire from the tower, returning fire. Objective Alpha, secure the runway. By dawn, the airfield was under U.S. control. Helicopters poured in reinforcements. The invasion's first major objective, complete. At the same time, Marines from the 6th Marine Expeditionary Brigade hit the Pacific coast near Arayan and Balboa, securing bridges and highways. The 82nd Airborne Division jumped into Fort Caba and Howard Air Base, surrounding Panama City like a tightening ring. It wasn't just an invasion. It was a lightning strike. 27,000 troops hitting 27 targets in under 2 hours. At the heart of Panama City stood La Comandancia, Noriega's military headquarters, a fortress of concrete surrounded by armed loyalists and snipers. As the invasion began, Delta Force and SEAL Team 4 were assigned to strike it fast and hard. But the plan ran into brutal resistance. Noriega's troops, the Panamanian Defense Forces, PDF, opened fire with machine guns and RPGs. The streets exploded with chaos. U.S. soldiers fought block by block, building by building. Civilians screamed and ran for cover as fire spread through the neighborhood. The Comandancia burned, orange flames against a black sky. By morning, U.S. forces controlled the area. Noriega had escaped, but his regime was collapsing. One veteran later said, "It wasn't victory yet, it was survival." Every street corner had an ambush waiting. While Rangers secured airfields and infantry battled in the city, Navy SEALs were sent on one of the most dangerous missions of the war, to destroy Noriega's private jet, so he couldn't but escape. They approached Paitilla Airfield under the cover of darkness, silent and invisible, but as they neared the tarmac, they were spotted. Automatic fire erupted. The SEALs fought back with everything they had. In minutes, 4 of America's best, Lieutenant J.G. Don McFall, BM-2 Chris Tilghman, R-1 Howard Hill, and BM-1 Chris Tilghman, were killed in action. Their bravery saved the mission. Noriega's jet was destroyed. He would never flee Panama. The next day, surviving SEALs carried their brothers' bodies back to the extraction point, silent, bloody, and proud. Their commander said later, "They didn't die in vain. They sealed the door on Noriega's escape with their lives." As the fighting raged, Noriega vanished. American intelligence tracked him through safe houses and military hideouts. He moved like a ghost, switching cars, disguises, and locations every few hours. The U.S. placed a $1 million bounty on his head. Psychological operations blasted messages across Panama. "Noriega, surrender now, you are surrounded." But the dictator held out, hoping his loyalists would regroup. Then came a twist straight out of a movie. Noriega fled into the Vatican embassy, claiming asylum under church protection. American forces surrounded it, but they couldn't storm in. It was sovereign territory. So instead, U.S. troops used a new weapon: sound. They blasted heavy rock music, Van Halen, AC/DC, Guns N' Roses, at full volume, 24 hours a day. The message was clear: you can't hide forever. After 10 days, the dictator broke. He surrendered on January 3, 1990. The world watched as American soldiers escorted him, handcuffed, out of the embassy. The reign of Noriega, and the fear that came with it, was over. The invasion was fast, but it was not easy. In just a few days, 23 American troops were killed, and over 300 were wounded. Many were young, barely 20 years old. Panamanian casualties were higher. The battle for the capital left deep scars. Yet even among the destruction, something powerful emerged: freedom. American veterans later said it was one of the cleanest, most precise operations of their generation, a mission that proved U.S. forces could strike with overwhelming force and still fight for justice. One ranger said, "We didn't come to conquer. We came to free people from fear. The veterans of Panama rarely called themselves heroes, but their stories speak louder than medals. Sergeant First Class William G. Wright, 82nd Airborne, remembered seeing children waving U.S. flags as his unit rolled in. We were covered in sweat and gunpowder, but those kids, they smiled. That's when I knew why we were there. Corporal Jason Hill, a Marine from Georgia, remembered pulling civilians out of burning homes. It wasn't just about taking ground. It was about saving lives. And Staff Sergeant Michael L. Perez summed it up best. We trained for war, but that night we gave a country back its freedom. Their courage didn't just end in Panama, it lived on in every mission that followed, from Iraq to Afghanistan. When the sun rose on December 21, 1989, Panama was free. The Panamanian Defense Forces had surrendered. U.S. troops handed control to the newly elected President Guillermo Endara, who took his oath inside a U.S. military base for safety. The Panama Canal was secure. Noriega was in custody. And thousands of American soldiers prepared to go home, exhausted, but proud. In less than 48 hours, the mission was accomplished. The U.S. had restored democracy, dismantled a dictatorship, and shown the world that America still stood for justice. Years later, many veterans of Operation Just Cause said it was one of the most defining moments of their lives. Not because of glory, but because of purpose. They weren't just fighting an enemy. They were protecting families, defending democracy, and proving that the U.S. military could act with precision and heart. Veterans' reunions often end with a single phrase whispered among old friends. We did our job, and we did it right. That's what Operation Just Cause became, a symbol of American resolve. Behind every victory, there's a price. Families who never saw their sons return. Veterans who still carry memories of that night. The flashes, the screams, the silence that followed. This wasn't just a mission, it was a reminder. Freedom is never free. The smoke had cleared. The gunfire faded into memory. And for the first time in years, the people of Panama stepped into sunlight without fear. It took 48 hours, 27,000 American troops, and the courage of every man and woman who wore the uniform. But the mission was complete. The dictator was gone. Freedom had a new name. Operation Just Cause. A mission that reminded the world what America stands for. January 3, 1990. The world watched as General Manuel Noriega, once one of the most powerful men in Latin America, was flown in handcuffs to Miami. There, he would stand trial for drug trafficking, racketeering, and money laundering. For the United States, this was more than just justice. It was redemption. The man who once worked with American intelligence had betrayed it. And now it was American veterans who brought him to justice. In Panama City, American troops were greeted with cheers, tears, and flags. Citizens hugged soldiers in the streets. Children shouted, "Gracias, America." The sense of liberation was real. But among the celebration, there was silence too, for those who didn't return. 23 American soldiers were killed in Operation Just Cause. Many more were wounded. Their names, their faces, their courage became part of the story that history almost forgets to tell. In places like Torrijos Airport, Fort Amador, and Panama Viejo, small crosses mark the ground where they fell. For their families, the war never really ended. Mothers received folded flags, brothers received medals, wives received silence. One mother later said, holding her son's uniform, he went to bring freedom to strangers, and came back as a hero. Every generation of veterans knows that price. Every war, from Normandy to Vietnam, from Baghdad to Kabul, carries the same truth. Freedom has a heartbeat, and it beats through sacrifice. Operation Just Cause wasn't just a mission, it was a turning point. It was the first large-scale combat operation after the Vietnam era. The world saw a new high-tech fast-strike U.S. military in action. Satellite coordination, night vision combat, special forces integration. For the first time, America's elite, Rangers, SEALs, Delta, Airborne, and Marines worked side by side in a fully synchronized assault. It became the blueprint for future operations: Desert Storm, Iraq, Afghanistan. The lessons learned in Panama shaped how America fought in the modern world. But the veterans of Just Cause will tell you, it wasn't technology that won the war. It was the human spirit. A ranger later said, "You can have all the equipment in the world, but when it's 3 a.m. and bullets are flying, it's your brothers that make you move forward." In the months that followed, Panama rebuilt. The new government took power under President Guillermo Endara, who promised democracy and peace. U.S. forces withdrew gradually, training Panama's new police and defense forces. The Panama Canal stayed secure. Trade resumed. For the first time in decades, the people of Panama could walk their streets at night, free from fear, free from dictatorship. But they never forgot the Americans who came. In Panama City today, murals still read, "Gracias, Soldado Americano." Thank you, American soldier. 30 years later, the veterans of Operation Just Cause gather quietly every December. They don't talk much about politics or strategy. They talk about brotherhood, duty, and the faces they still remember. Many still wear the same unit patches, faded, but proud. Some walk with canes, some with medals, all with memories. One veteran, Sergeant Tom Reyes, said at a reunion, "When people ask what Panama was like, I tell them, it was short, it was fierce, and it was right. We brought back honor to what we wear." Another veteran, CPLR Daniel Brooks, added, "You don't forget the sound of gunfire, but you also don't forget the feeling of seeing a family wave the U.S. flag in gratitude. That's what makes it worth it." Their words carry the weight of truth. That service isn't about glory. It's about meaning. Operation Just Cause sent a clear signal to the world. America would stand up for its citizens, defend democracy, and act when others stayed silent. But it also reminded the nation of something deeper, that veterans are the living link between freedom and sacrifice. These weren't just soldiers. They were fathers, sons, and daughters who risked everything to do what had to be done. Every veteran who served in Panama became part of a legacy that stretches from the beaches of Normandy to the deserts of the Middle East. They proved, no matter the year, no matter the enemy, the American fighting spirit never fades. Operation Just Cause is often called the forgotten victory, overshadowed by the Gulf War that followed. But for those who were there, it's unforgettable, because it wasn't about politics or headlines. It was about doing the right thing when it mattered most. For the veterans, the sound of helicopters at dawn still brings a rush of emotion. The smell of gunpowder, the sight of the canal, the faces of Panamanian children, frozen in memory forever. They don't wear their medals for show. They wear them for the ones who never made it home. Today, the lessons of Panama live on in every corner of the U.S. military. Special Forces training, rapid deployment doctrine, and urban warfare tactics all trace their roots to this operation. But beyond the strategy, the spirit of the mission remains its greatest legacy. A reminder that American veterans aren't just warriors, they're guardians of peace. In every military cemetery, beneath every flag, lies the same unspoken truth. Freedom didn't come easy. It came from people who were willing to stand. To every veteran who fought in Panama, to those who came home and those who didn't, America remembers you. Your courage lit the path for every soldier who followed. The world may forget dates, battles, or headlines, but it will never forget the heart of the American warrior. You didn't fight for power. You fought for people. You fought for peace. And you fought for each other. If this story moved you, if you believe in honoring those who served, hit, comment, respect, and subscribe to American Veterans Stories, because their courage deserves to be remembered forever.